Good afternoon once again from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones with your afternoon update on the potential severe weather expected across the area tomorrow. And we're already starting to feel the early effects of that in the fact that it's been very windy out there this afternoon. And if you think it's windy out there now, just wait till tomorrow. We're expecting some really strong winds tomorrow in the order of 50 miles per hour or greater, and that's ahead of the actual potential severe weather that we're expecting across the area tomorrow. That's mainly going to come in the form of a squall line. We're going to talk about the details about that, as well as we've got an hour-by-hour breakdown on when to expect that squall line to move through the area from west to east. The good news is it's going to be a relatively short-lived severe weather event. We're not expecting it to be an all-day event. That squall line is going to move through, and you probably have maybe a 1 to 2 hour period or so of potential severe weather. After that, though, once the squall line actually moves through, conditions should begin to improve quickly after that. As always, this is a live interactive briefing, so if you have any questions as we go through our briefing, feel free to post them in our comment section, and we'll answer them here over the next little while just as soon as we wrap up our briefing. Let's go ahead and jump into it here real quick. Let me switch over. And again, as I mentioned at the top here, we have some very strong winds out there this afternoon. We're looking at wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour this afternoon, but that's actually just a precursor of things to come. We'll actually be looking at gusts up to 50 miles per hour possible in some locations as we go through the day tomorrow. And again, that's before the storms actually arrive. This is just what we call gradient winds, just because of the difference between the low pressure area that's going to be approaching with that cold front and the high pressure area that's brought us some pretty nice weather over the last couple of days. That's moved off. In between the two, there's what we call a pressure gradient. And as that tightens, that differential between the high pressure and the low pressure, the winds tend to increase. So we're going to be looking at very strong winds through the day tomorrow that could result in some downed tree limbs and some localized power outages even before the severe weather actually arrives. So don't be surprised if we see some isolated areas lose some power during the day tomorrow just from those strong winds ahead of that line of storms. Now, we are looking at a squall line of storms moving through the area, depending on where you are, anywhere from, say, mid-morning through early to mid-afternoon. We'll be looking at the squall line actually getting into parts of southeast Texas between about 8 and 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then moving into parts of lower Acadiana during the mid-afternoon time frame. We'll talk exactly when you can expect that here in just a little bit, but it's not going to last that long across the entire area. The squall line itself will be only in an individual area for maybe about an hour or so, and that's when our biggest severe weather threat is going to exist. Now, the biggest risk is going to be for damaging winds, because within that squall line itself, we could be looking at winds of 75 miles per hour or greater in some locations. That's basically a Category 1 hurricane strength wind that we're going to be looking at within this squall line. In addition to that, we are going to be looking at the possibility of a few tornadoes as well. Now, I think the damaging wind is going to be the higher overall risk, but a few tornadoes will be possible, and a couple of those will have the potential to be strong. If you recall the F3 tornado that hit the New Orleans area last week, we're kind of looking at a similar environment in that regard, so the potential for strong tornadoes will exist. That's not to say that they're going to happen, but the potential is there for them to develop. Rainfall totals, we're still only looking at between about a quarter inch up to maybe an inch of rainfall, so we're not expecting this to be a real significant flash flood threat, although there will be a period of heavy rainfall as that squall line moves through, but I don't expect it to be enough to result in a significant flash flood event. This is a look at the latest Storm Prediction Center severe weather outlook. You can see parts of the area here highlighted in red. That is a moderate risk for severe weather. That's a Category 4 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center severe weather scale. And this extends up pretty much all through Mississippi, up into parts of Alabama. Even parts of western Tennessee are in a pretty substantial risk for severe weather as we go through the day tomorrow. But for our area, this covers Rapides, Avoyelles, Evangeline, and St. Landry parishes in that highest risk area, that moderate risk for severe weather. The area is highlighted in orange here. I'll make this full screen for you so you can get a little bit better look at it here. The area is highlighted in orange there. That's going to include the Fort Polk area, Allen, Jeff Davis, Acadia, Lafayette, down towards Vermilion, Iberia, St. Martin, St. Mary. You are in an enhanced risk for severe weather. So that's a Category 3 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center's severe weather scale. And then back to the west, so essentially from Lake Charles west into parts of southeast Texas, the area is highlighted in yellow there. That is a category 2 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center scale, or a slight risk. So overall, the risk factor or the risk level goes down with as further west you go. But regardless, we are still looking at a severe weather risk pretty much across the entire region as we go through the day tomorrow. Of course, the exact time you're expected to see that risk is going to vary depending on exactly where you are. We'll talk about that timing here in just a second. This is a risk, the risk for the possibility of seeing tornadoes. And again, I'll make this full screen for you so you can take a little bit closer look, and then I'll come back and point a few things out to you. The areas highlighted in red there, pretty much the same areas in the moderate risk, and we're looking at a 15% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of any given location in that red area. So if you're in the Alexandria area, a 15% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of Alexandria. Same thing down toward the Opelousas area, up towards Marksville, anywhere that's in that area highlighted in red. The area is highlighted in kind of that golden, orangish, yellow color. That is a 10% probability of seeing a tornado. So that's going to include the Lafayette, New Iberia, Morgan City area, back towards Fort Polk, DeRidder, Leesville, those areas as well, Oberlin, Kinder. And then coming back to the west even further towards the Lake Charles area, a lower risk, but still a 5% chance of seeing tornadoes within 25 miles of any location in the area highlighted in brown here. And then the green area is a 2% probability. That's Beaumont and points further west. So a lower overall probability, again, for tornadoes with as further west you go. So essentially, the further east you go, the higher your overall risk is going to be. The further west, the lower the risk is expected to be. This is the overall risk for, or the overall probability of seeing severe winds. So that's 60 mile per hour or greater wind expected to be seen across an area. You can see the areas highlighted in purple there, very similar locations, a 45% chance of seeing severe winds. So that's 60 mile per hour or greater winds within 25 miles of a location. So again, for example, in the Alexandria area, there's a 45% chance of seeing 60 mile per hour or greater wind within 25 miles of Alexandria. And you can see that risk factor goes down the further west you go. The area is in red, a 30% probability. So that does include the Lafayette area and to basically right at Lake Charles. And then from Lake Charles west to Beaumont, about a 15% probability, and then lower overall values as you go further west from there. Bottom line, though, is the highest risk or the most significant severe weather threat is going to come from these strong winds as we go through the day tomorrow. That's the highest probability of any of the three types of severe weather. And then we do have a low-end hail risk, but it's pretty low across the entire region. We're looking at about a 5% chance of hail of quarter size or larger across the entire region. So we're not ruling it out, but the overall risk for hail is pretty low with this system. Rainfall totals continue to be anywhere between about a quarter inch up to perhaps an inch on the highest end. But most of the area expected to see anywhere between about a quarter to a half inch of rainfall. So this is not expected to be a significant flash flood event across the region, although all of that rainfall that is going to fall, most of it's going to fall within that squall line within about an hour or so. So the potential for heavy rainfall will be there, not so much, though, widespread flash flooding. We do have a wind advisory that continues this afternoon for pretty much the entire region except for interior parts of southeast Texas. So it does not include Tyler, Hardin, Jasper, or Newton counties, but it does include the remainder of the region, including Jefferson and Orange counties, as well as all of southwest, central, and south central Louisiana. This will go through the night tonight, and then as we head into tomorrow, we're going to actually upgrade that to a high wind warning. You can see the areas in orange here. This is a high wind warning. Now, we don't issue these very often across our area. In fact, the last time we've issued a high wind warning for our region was, I believe, November of 2015. So it's been almost 7 years since we've actually issued a high wind warning across our area. Now, a high wind warning means that we're expecting sustained winds of 40 miles per hour or greater within this area. So like I said before, if you thought it was windy today, just wait till tomorrow. It's going to be even windier, and that will have the potential to produce some power outages because we're basically talking about tropical storm force winds across all of southwest Louisiana. Now, southeast Texas not officially in this high wind warning at this time, but it's still going to be very windy over that way. We do still have that wind advisory in effect. So don't be surprised if you're still looking at some 30, 40 mile an hour wind gusts across parts of southeast Texas tomorrow too, even though you're not explicitly in this high wind warning. But the remainder of southwest Louisiana, central Louisiana, south central Louisiana, all in this high wind warning. And that'll go from 11 a.m. tomorrow morning until 5 p.m. tomorrow evening. This is a look at the wind gusts that we're expecting through the rest of the afternoon and evening. This evening, we're looking at anywhere between about 25 to 30 mile per hour winds expected. As we go into tomorrow, though, take a look at some of these values here. I'll make that full screen for you again. 40 to 50 plus mile an hour wind gusts expected across the region, especially across parts of Acadiana. That's where we're expecting our highest winds to actually occur. And again, all of this is going to be ahead of the actual squall line itself. So this is not within thunderstorms. This is actually before the thunderstorms actually arrive. This is going to be during the morning, during the midday time frame. We're going to be looking at these strong winds that are going to be capable of producing some power outages even before the storms themselves actually arrive. So now let's talk about the actual time of arrival of these storms and when we expect them to move through. We're starting, this graphic here starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. You can see the squall line back here to the west across parts of southeast Texas. Again, I'll make this full screen for you again so you can take a better look at it there. You see it west of Beaumont. As we go forward in time here, sorry about that, I pressed the wrong button there. As we go forward in time here, you'll see by 10 a.m. that squall line beginning to approach parts of Tyler, Hardin, and Jefferson counties. You see the scattered shower and thunderstorm activity out in front of that. Any one of those storms will have the potential to become strong to severe. These individual cells, let me come back here, I'll point them out to you here. You can see this activity up in here. Now, the computer models don't do a very good job of actually depicting those individual cells developing, but it does kind of give us an indication that there will be some activity out here in front of this main squall line. That's going to develop earlier in the morning. Any one of these could potentially become strong to severe all by itself as an individual cell, what we call a supercell or a discrete supercell. And those will also have the potential to produce strong winds and possibly tornadoes. But the biggest risk is going to be with the squall line itself as it begins to move into the area by, again, as we said, mid-morning for parts of southeast Texas. And then right around the noontime hour or early afternoon for southwest Louisiana, you'll see it here by noontime. We basically got it right along the Sabine River at the Texas-Louisiana state line. So moving through the Beaumont area, most likely between about 11 a.m. and noon. Same thing for the Jasper-Newton area. And then getting into the Lake Charles area, likely between about noon and 1 p.m. tomorrow. Same thing as we move up towards the DeRidder, Fort Polk area. We're looking at about noon to 1 p.m. for that main squall line to come through that area. And then again, as we talked about a minute ago, once this squall line actually moves through, you see there's no rain behind it. The cold front's going to be kind of right along the leading edge of that squall line. So once the squall line gets through, the severe weather threat is going to be over with from there forward. So while we'll still be dealing with the severe weather threat through the afternoon across parts of central and south central Louisiana, southeast Texas is going to be done with the severe weather threat by about noontime, between about noon and 1 p.m. Tomorrow. So kind of bear that in mind, that once this squall line gets through, the severe weather threat will be over with. So if you have to get out and about, if you have plans, if you can kind of hold off on them until the severe weather actually moves through, then you're going to be in much better shape. You won't have anything to worry about thereafter. Moving into between about 1 and 2 p.m., you can see the squall line continuing into Jeff Davis, parts of Allen Parish, getting up towards Alexandria. Then east of Alexandria, most likely by about 3 p.m., but getting into parts of Avoyelles Parish, Evangeline, St. Landry, down towards Lafayette. Then 3 to 4 p.m., moving through the Lafayette area, down towards New Iberia. And then finally clearing out of Lower Acadiana, it looks like between about 5 and 6 p.m., with the activity then moving through the Baton Rouge area and points further east. So that kind of gives you an idea of what to expect as far as the overall timing of the storm systems. And I know a lot of people will probably ask me to go through that again, so we'll go through it again here in just a minute, but I want to kind of get through the rest of the briefing here. Here's our cold front. Here's where it is basically this afternoon. This is the storm system that's going to be bringing us that severe weather tomorrow. And there's actually high pressure. You see it off the east coast here. And that's why these winds have been so strong, because the cold front is basically an area of low pressure. You can see the center of the low pressure area right up there, up in Kansas. But we're looking at kind of the differential between the area high pressure off the east coast and the low pressure right there. We're kind of squeezed right in the middle of it. That's why we're looking at those strong winds. And that's why this is going to continue to tighten. The difference between this high pressure and this low is going to continue to tighten as we go through the day tomorrow. And that's going to result in some very strong winds. You see these strong southerly winds kind of developing. You've got high pressure over here, of course, winds spin clockwise around high pressure areas. And we've got this big area of low pressure up here, winds spin counterclockwise around areas of low pressure. And we're kind of squeezed right in the middle. You see those strong southerly winds right there. So that's kind of what we're going to be dealing with. And again, we're looking at 50 plus mile per hour wind gusts in some locations with regards to that as we go through the day tomorrow and basically until this cold front actually moves through. So the frontal boundary is going to move through sometime, depending on where you are, between late morning and mid-afternoon. Now the winds behind it, they're still going to be breezy, but they're not going to be nearly as strong as they're going to be ahead of the frontal boundary. So we'll still probably be looking at some 15, 20 mile an hour winds behind the front, but the winds will be noticeably lighter behind the front than what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow morning. By Thursday, the front's completely through the area. We're looking at high pressure building back in across the region. We're going to be looking at very nice weather Thursday and Friday. And then as we get into Saturday, we've got another little weak frontal boundary that's going to be kind of pushing through the area. That's going to bring us another round of scattered showers and thunderstorms. I don't expect it to be too much in the way of severe with that activity, but it may put a little bit of a damper on our Saturday, at least part of it, with some scattered showers and thunderstorms around. But Sunday, actually not looking too bad once that front actually gets through. And then Monday, just a 20% chance of showers and thunderstorms. So we're going to be looking at basically 2 days of nice weather once we get through this system, 1 day of on Saturday, and then nice again Sunday through early next week. So that's what we have here from the National Weather Service. Again, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment section. We'll answer them here over the next little while. Before I do that, I want to run back through the timing one more time here for those who are just joining us as far as the severe weather tomorrow. So we're going to start by looking at the 9 a.m. time frame. We've got that squall line back off to the west across parts of central Texas, just west of the Houston area. And then as we move forward in time, that didn't work. As we move forward in time here, you can see by 10 a.m. that squall line getting into the Houston area. You see the scattered shower and thunderstorm activity out there in front of the squall line. So you may see some scattered showers and thunderstorms develop ahead of that actual squall line during the morning hours. So we may see some on and off rain across southwest Louisiana as early as 9 or 10 a.m. Now that squall line is going to be moving through southeast Texas between about 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. You can see it beginning to develop there, moving through the Beaumont area up towards Jasper and Newton. And then by noontime, again, basically right along the Sabine River there between Texas and Louisiana, moving into southwest Louisiana between about noon and 1 p.m. So that'll be the Lake Charles area up towards DeRidder, Leesville, Fort Polk, and then over towards Alexandria between about 2 and 3 p.m. Then between about 3 and 6 p.m., moving across parts of Acadiana from Lafayette down towards New Iberia and Morgan City. And then by 6 p.m., over towards the Baton Rouge area, and then beginning to get into parts of the New Orleans area as well. So that kind of gives you an idea with what to expect as far as the timing of the squall line itself. But bear in mind that we're going to be dealing with not only scattered showers and thunderstorms out in front of that, that'll start several hours earlier, but also those very strong winds that we're expecting to develop well ahead of that activity tomorrow morning. Again, we're looking at wind gusts 50 plus miles an hour, especially across parts of Acadiana. So it is certainly going to be very windy out that way. Let me go ahead. I'm going to run over here and check to see if we do have any questions. I'll leave those wind gusts up there for you for just a minute while I read through the questions and comments here. So bear with me just a moment. If you do have a question or comment, go ahead and throw it in there. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Letitia says, I don't like how windy it is already. It's very warm and conducive for spinning things. Not today, it's not, but it will be. And actually, I can show you kind of graphically what that looks like. We showed this earlier. Again, we were looking at these are the winds actually at ground level. But if we move up through the atmosphere a little bit, I'm going to actually lift and show a forecast here for what the winds are expected to be. This is a couple of thousand feet up in the air. And if I click on this here, you can actually see that's about 60 miles an hour. And this is just a couple thousand feet off the ground. And a lot of times what will happen with these storms and these squall lines, it'll actually push some of these stronger winds from higher up in the atmosphere all the way down to the surface. So that's why we're expecting those severe winds within that squall line. And then going even higher up into the atmosphere, this is about halfway up into the atmosphere, you can see those winds are even stronger. We're looking at 80, 90, 100 mile an hour winds in some cases across parts of the area. This is what could potentially result in some spinning. It's what we call speed wind shear, where you have much stronger winds higher up in the atmosphere than you do at the surface. Even though we're going to be looking at plenty strong winds at the surface to begin with, the winds higher up in the atmosphere are going to be much stronger. So that could potentially result in some, as you call it, spinny things. Lynn's asking about the timing of this. Again, we kind of went through the timing a couple of times. Hopefully you were able to, that looks like that question's a few minutes old, so hopefully we answered your questions there with regards to that. Tyler's asking, is there a good chance of tornadoes in Rapides Parish Wednesday? I wouldn't say there's a good chance. There is a chance. The bigger threat with this system is going to be damaging winds, much more so than tornadoes. Now, here is the official probability of seeing tornadoes. Let's see, we're looking for Rapides Parish. So you are in the higher risk area. We're officially looking at about a 15% probability of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of anywhere in Rapides Parish. So there is a risk, but I think the highest risk as far as severe weather goes is going to be in the form of strong winds, because while there's a 15% chance of seeing a tornado, there's a 45% chance of seeing strong winds of 60 miles per hour or greater. So I think that's going to be your bigger risk in that area as we go with this severe weather event. Chris asks, can we expect gusts of 75 miles per hour in Lake Charles? As that squall line moves through, yes, that will be a possibility. Now, ahead of that, we could be looking at gusts of 50 miles per hour before the squall line even moves through. That's our official forecast for wind gusts tomorrow. So it's going to be windy regardless. But yeah, 70 mile an hour, 75 mile per hour wind gusts in Lake Charles will be a possibility as that squall line moves through. Jonathan says he's mainly commenting from YouTube to see if it works. Thanks for doing that, Jonathan. It looked like it might have been shut off earlier, so hopefully it looks like you are commenting from YouTube, so I guess that is working. That's good news. Can we describe the black hatched lines and the significance of the probability maps that we hinted at the start? Yeah, absolutely. Let me come back over here. We'll go full screen, and let me get to that specifically. So what we're looking at here, we'll start by talking about the tornadoes. You see the kind of, we call it the hatched area. It's basically kind of these dotted dashed black lines that you see there, essentially extending kind of from northern Beauregard Parish down to Vermilion Parish and along the coastline there and all the areas in between and kind of to the northeast of that. That is where you see it kind of in the legend there. That is the possibility of significant tornadoes. Let me turn this off so you can take a little better there. And what we mean by significant tornadoes, that's where the possibility of EF2 or greater tornadoes is expected to be the greatest, essentially, is from that area that what we call that hatched area. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we actually have that. Now, we don't always have that. It's usually when we have a moderate risk or greater in effect for parts of our area that they'll actually delineate where they expect the strongest tornadoes to develop if they develop. But that's kind of what we're looking for with regards to that. We've got a similar thing on our potential for severe wind graphic, which you can see there. And again, that is the probability of 75 mile per hour or more winds, which essentially exists from just east of the Lake Charles area. It does include Lafayette. It does include Alexandria. That's kind of what that delineates there, where the overall strongest winds. Although there's a risk everywhere, that's where the probability for the most severe winds and the potentially largest tornadoes are going to exist. So that's kind of what that indicates there. So thanks for testing YouTube out for me, Jonathan. I certainly appreciate that. And I'm still not sure if we're able to actually get comments from Twitter. That's something I'm still working on as well, but hopefully we can get that kind of panned out as well. Cindy's asking about school closures. I don't know anything about school closures as of yet. As of right now, I'm not aware of any decisions that have been made with regards to school closures. As we talk about with all of these events, that's left up to the individual school boards of the individual parishes. I have not heard any word of any school closures as of yet. They have been briefed on the situation. In fact, they were just briefed on it at about 2:30, just a short time before we came on the air here. So they do have the latest information as well. And I'd imagine they'll probably make those decisions at some point this afternoon or this evening. Let's see, James says, I'm driving from NOLA to Lafayette tomorrow around lunch. Would it be better via Morgan City or Baton Rouge? I'm not sure that one's going to be a whole lot better than the other, although generally speaking, the closer you get to the coastline, the lower the overall risk is going to be. So if everything else being equal, Morgan City might be slightly better. in terms of trying to avoid the worst of the severe weather, but anywhere across South Louisiana during that time frame is not going to be ideal. Alexis asks, what kind of environment is conducive for tornadoes, especially strong ones? Well, that wind shear that we just talked about a minute ago, those winds being stronger in the middle levels of the atmosphere, that's a compelling part of it. You also want to look at winds that are actually kind of turning as you go higher in the atmosphere. So, for example, let me pull that little graphic back up real quick. This is a quick and dirty severe weather meteorology lesson for you. But basically, since we have almost due south winds, you can see around South Louisiana there, this is on Wednesday. What you want to see if you're looking for favorable conditions for tornadoes is as you go higher in the atmosphere, you want to see those winds start to turn. You see how they're kind of more southwesterly as we go higher up in the atmosphere, and then more almost out of the due south closer to the surface. That is a favorable indication for tornadoes. And the more rapidly, the more significantly that turn is as you go higher in the atmosphere, generally the more favorable it is, because that is what kind of gets the whole storm system turning, because it's building upwards as the storm is developing through the atmosphere. So as it's building, it's also starting to rotate, and that's what can result in not just tornadoes, but any kind of severe weather for that matter. But that is one of the more favorable conditions for tornadoes. There are others. I don't have the graphics to kind of explain them right now, but that's kind of the one that's most easiest to explain from what I have up here at the moment. Nicole says, I'm headed to Houston tomorrow morning, flying out at noonish. I'm sure we'll drive through it at some point. When does it enter Southeast Texas? We're expecting that to move. It'll be through the Houston area probably by about 9 or 10 a.m. from what we've been looking at there. So if your flight's actually at noon, you may be driving through it in the morning, but it shouldn't impact your flight any. Brian asks, how does this wind threat compare to what we saw in Laura? I'd say it's not really much of a comparison. When you were talking about in Laura, we were looking at winds of 150 miles an hour, we'll call it 130 to 140 in the Lake Charles area maybe. So that's not really a comparison, but that's not to say that we couldn't be looking at some significant damaging winds. I mean, we're talking about the possibility of 75 mile an hour plus winds. That's Category 1 hurricane force winds, so it's certainly capable of doing some significant damage, especially to areas that were already and continue to be impacted by Laura. There are a lot of people still in trailers and mobile homes, people with the blue tarps still on their roofs. We've kind of discussed that. Those people are going to be more particularly vulnerable to these kind of winds than they might already be. So as far as a direct comparison to Laura, I'd say there's no comparison. Laura was head and shoulders much stronger than anything we're going to see in this event, short of maybe a tornado. But still, there is going to be a significant risk of damage from these winds. Cindy asks, what about the marine layer this time? The marine layer is most likely going to play something of a role. Now, again, the marine layer tends to inhibit severe weather development closer to the coastline. Now, the further north you get away from the coastline, usually the higher the overall risk is. And you can kind of see that on this graphic here. There is a lower general risk closer to the coastline. The higher risk area is going to be to the north and east of our area. This graphic actually extends much further across Mississippi, up into Arkansas and Tennessee, and they've got a significant risk up that way as well. So generally, we're kind of on the back edge of this risk area, if you will, and that's partially due to that marine layer. So yeah, that will be in play. We'll see how much of an impact it actually winds up having as far as limiting the severe weather across our region. Katie's asking, is there any strong winds possible for Lumberton, Texas? Yes, absolutely. Pretty much the entire region is at risk for seeing strong winds. Stephanie's asking, will Vinton be under a tornado watch or warning? I can almost guarantee you'll probably be under a tornado watch at some point tomorrow. Tornado warning, well, that's going to depend on whether we see any tornadic activity actually developing and heading in your general direction. But I'd imagine there's a high likelihood that a tornado watch will be issued sometime tomorrow morning for probably this in our entire area, and that will include Vinton. Okay, let's see. Brian says, Rapides Parish Schools in Alexandria announced they are closed tomorrow. I can't independently verify that, but again, as far as school closures go, all of that is available or will be made available, no doubt, on your local TV media stations or websites. They get that information long before we do. If I do get confirmation of that, I'll be happy to pass it along to you. And if anybody else is aware of any other school closures, please do let us know. But that's not something they usually tell us directly. They usually tell the your local TV stations, that news stations, that information first. So that's probably the more reliable place to get that information. Susan asks, why are the winds so active? Is it the jet stream? Thank you very much. Appreciated. Yes, you're absolutely right. And in fact, that graphic I just showed you there a minute ago, I'll throw it back up here again. There's actually two jet streams going on here. There's a low-level jet stream. That's what we kind of call it here. And you can kind of see that. Let me come back here. I'll point it out to you. You can basically see that kind of right up in here. This is a jet stream, a low-level jet stream. And then if we come up a little further into the middle parts of the atmosphere here at about 500 millibars, which again is about halfway up, you can see this right up in here. That's a jet stream too. This is 100 mile per hour plus winds in a lot of areas right up in there. So that is a jet stream, yeah. And that is partially, well, in large part responsible for the strong winds that we're going to be seeing here. So yes, that is definitely a factor. And yes, that's what a jet stream looks like. Susan asks, is Homa outside of the bad weather? No, Homa is going to be seeing this bad weather. It's going to be a little bit later in the evening. Again, that's kind of falls outside of the area that we cover. That's over in the Weather Service New Orleans, Baton Rouge area, which their office is actually located in Slidell. They do Facebook Live briefings just like this, so they'll be happy to answer that question probably in better detail than I can. So they do have social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and the like. You can get more information from them over that way. But yes, that severe weather threat is going to extend into Homa. Homa's kind of right off my map here, but that threat will exist all the way across South Louisiana as we go through the day. Now you're going to be looking at more probably a late afternoon to early evening time frame over that way, but there still will be a severe weather risk. Thomas says, we never missed school for bad weather unless it was a hurricane. Well, that's called progress. We're better at forecasting severe weather now than we were, years and years and years ago, back when I was in primary school or middle school, as opposed to now. So, technology has improved since then. Evelyn asks, will they have hail on this radar? The overall risk for hail is actually pretty low. There is a risk. I can't completely rule it out, but we're looking at about a 5% chance of seeing large hail, which is quarter-size hail or larger. And that pretty much extends anywhere across the area here. You can see the whole area in that ugly brown color. But that's basically what that means. There's a 5% chance of seeing large hail within 25 miles of any location, pretty much across our entire area. So yes, there is a risk, but it is a pretty low risk. The much higher risk is going to be the threat for damaging winds. Leslie says, hopefully no flooding or tornadoes. Well, the overall risk for flooding is very, very low with this event because it's going to be moving pretty quickly. So right now we're looking at forecast rainfall totals anywhere between about a quarter inch up to an inch in total. These are our rainfall totals behind me. I'll go ahead and throw that full screen for you. So overall, we're looking at relatively limited rainfall totals. And the fact that it's going to be moving pretty quick is also going to be favorable to keep any kind of flash flooding from developing. Now, these rainstorms will have the potential to produce very heavy rainfall over a short period of time. So that could result in some street flooding just from the fact that it's going to be falling so fast, it may not have time to actually run off before the streets start to get some water on them. It's what we call nuisance flooding. But we're not expecting that to result in real significant threats to homes or businesses or anything like that, because we're not expecting the kind of rainfall totals that would normally result in that. So the overall flash flood risk is pretty low. Now, there is a risk for tornadoes. You know, it's not as high as the damaging straight line wind threat, but we are going to be looking at a risk for tornadoes as we go into tomorrow. Joshua says, how does rain that's way intense cause dish satellites to lose feeds on the television networks, then restores when they calm? That has to do with the signal. You know, when you're talking about a dish, you're essentially getting that signal from a satellite that's in space. So when you've got, you know, a lot of moisture, which is basically what heavy rain is, and you've got thick clouds, you've got lightning, you've got all kinds of stuff that interferes with that signal. So that's why a lot of times you'll lose signal in the middle of a storm. And then once the storm moves past and those clouds start to thin out a little bit, that signal comes back. So it's really just interference with the signal that that causes that to go out. Tommy's asking about safety of school buses in the high winds. That's a good question. You know, when we're talking about strong gradient winds, especially on the order of magnitude that we're talking about tomorrow with 50+ mile-an-hour gusts, school buses are very high-profile vehicles, and it's not just school buses, but also you know, large vans, 18-wheelers. All of those are very susceptible to high winds, because if you think about a bus or you think about an 18-wheeler, you've got a very broad side there. So if you're traveling, these winds are going to be coming out of the south. So if you're traveling kind of east and west, say along the interstate, or you know, 210, whatever the case may be, you know, you're taking the brunt of that 40, 50+ mile-an-hour wind gust moving across that bus. That has a tendency, especially with those big, broad vehicles, to kind of blow them all over the place. So yeah, that is a significant risk, especially with winds of this magnitude as we go into tomorrow. That's going to be a concern for any kind of broad vehicles, vans, 18-wheelers, school buses. All of those will be at risk of getting blown around pretty good by those very strong winds, especially as you get kind of elevated. So if you're kind of going over the 210 bridge or the I-10 bridge, those areas are going to be even more susceptible to, because the winds higher up are going to be even stronger than they're going to be actually at the surface. So that's a good question. That's something to bear in mind as well. All right, not seeing too many more questions at the moment, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up our briefing here. If you have a question that I missed for some reason, or you think of one while you're viewing this as a recording, feel free to shoot me a direct message on Facebook. You can also send us a tweet at NWS Lake Charles. You can also send us an Instagram message at NWS Lake Charles also. What else? Lots of ways to get in touch with us. Let me see if I can put, I don't know if I still have my email on here anymore, but you can email me directly at my email address. It's donald.jones with a dot in the middle of my name, basically. You can see my name on the screen there. Just put a dot in the middle of it at NOAA, NOAA.gov, G-O-V, and you can send me a message or question directly. I'll be happy to answer your questions that way. You can also give us a call here at our office at area code 337-477-5285, and you can speak to a forecaster directly. We have forecasters here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for your question answering pleasure. We will provide another one of these updates again tomorrow morning. The event is likely to be unfolding at that point, but we will have another update tomorrow morning to provide you with the latest. Obviously, by that point, with the squall line likely already developed, we'll have a much better idea of exactly when we expect it to move through each individual area. So that can kind of give you an idea of when you need to hunker down versus when you need to actually get up and get moving to, or when you can get up and get moving once again, once the severe weather threat is passed. So just kind of bear that in mind. We'll have another briefing here tomorrow morning. We'll probably plan on doing it either 9 or 10 a.m. I'll have the social media details put out there for you just as soon as we get that information available. In the meantime, everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening. Try to stay safe. Remember, it's going to be very windy out there this evening, tonight, but especially tomorrow. So even ahead of those thunderstorms, you definitely want to be careful, especially if you have to be out on the roadways. Those winds will blow vehicles around, especially high-profile vehicles like we talked about, vans, SUVs, buses, 18-wheelers, all going to be very susceptible to those strong winds as we go through the day tomorrow. So make sure you stay safe if you're on the roads. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.